Hi, Mickey.
Hey, Bob.
That looks like a picture of an old white guy. What is who? He looks like I would recognize him if I knew my American history.
Not American history.
Oh,
If you knew your global intellectual history.
I don't know. Voltaire. Who is it?
I don't know. Let's just say
Wait, you don't know?
Marx famously turned him on his head.
Oh, is that Hegel?
Except I can't turn him on his head because every time I turn him on his head, the iPad writes him.
Yeah, you gotta do the auto lock thing. That's Hegel.
And you know what? Yes, it's Hegel. Do you know why I'm holding a picture of Hegel, Bob?
Because he said the owl of Minerva flies at dusk, and that means we will only understand the meaning of this Virginia election months from now, years from now, and there's no point in talking about it now. Is that?
No, nice try at a transition to nowhere.
That's where I'm hoping to go. I'd rather go there than where you're taking us.
These people on the web who I sort of follow because they're involved in the child tax credit put a list of, you didn't see this? Who are your 10 big philosophers, theorists, economists who have influenced your views of the world? And they each list 10, and they list people like Francis Fukuyama, Friedrich Hayek, Amartya Sen, and Sam Hammond, who goes by the name Ham and Cheese.
On Twitter.
He's a player. Said Joseph Heath, Robert Brandom, I've never heard of, Charles Taylor, Friedrich Hayek, Michael Lind, Ronald Coase, and G.W.F. Hegel. That's Hegel.
Yes, we've seen him.
And Robert Reiter.
That's me.
That's you. And I had no idea. I mean, I can handle Michael Lind. I can't handle Hegel.
So I'm
debating Hegel.
So somebody who's not nobody said I'm somebody?
A bunch of people. You have a following. Unfortunately, the good news is you have a following. The bad news is that they're extremely misguided people who endorse the refundable child tax credit. So
that's the same litmus test I use, Mickey. I think we use it in different ways. But when in fact, I just only last week checked to see Hegel's position on that on Wikipedia. Couldn't find it. Well, that's flattering. And
you should be, you're going to get serotonin poisoning. I better.
Well, and you know why that's nice of him? That's nice of Samuel Hammond to do that, because I once complained, maybe in the Parrot Room, about him having, I claimed, kind of misrepresented my book in a mildly disparaging way, arguably disparaging way, in a piece he wrote. And I'm pretty sure he was aware of that, and there was some kind of exchange. And yet, he doesn't hold it against me. Well, it wasn't a fair allegation, actually. It was me being too sensitive.
Maybe you influenced him. Like my view is, your book changed my life, not necessarily for the better.
You mean the moral? You mean the moral animal?
The moral animal. The moral animal did change my life. It's one of the inflection points, you might say, in terms of how I think of the world. But knowing mankind's inherent in human evil nature, or at least men, didn't necessarily make me sunnier or more idealistic. I don't know. It may have made me a little more cynical.
Oh, God. Am I to blame for your voting for Trump? It all started in 1994.
I'm just saying it might be better if everybody blissfully went through the world unaware of our deep subconscious urges.
I don't mention them anymore. I agree.
You're joking, right?
Well, I haven't been doing well. No, I mean, I talk about subtler, unfortunate things about human nature these days. The cognitive biases that sustain tribalism, Mickey. Not the raw lust that drives men to do bad things.
I like the raw lust. I'm into the raw lust.
Really?
I don't want these
anything to share? Any recent?
No, I just think it's a fundamental motivator.
Well,
for example,
yeah, kind of. Yeah.
It doesn't explain Trump shifting our focus to the elections, because he can't be motivated by sex. As we've discussed, he's motivated by attention.
Right.
And the attention is at this point disconnected from any sex. I mean, he can get sex if he wants
but that's the thing. I mean, that's why I hesitated when you said, lust motivates people to do great things, or whatever you just said. I mean, it doesn't it doesn't directly. I mean, we have separate motivations to get things that have been correlated with reproductive success. Like the drive for status may be there because it aids reproductive success, but that doesn't mean it is itself lustful. It is a drive for status. I mean, there's all kinds of things, having friends was conducive to reproductive success. That doesn't feel anything like lust unless, it depends on the friend, I suppose. But you know what I mean.
I can tell you all about that, Bob.
I don't know. That has got Parrot Room written all over it.
No, it's well known that it's lonely out here for somebody who voted for Trump. But anyway, the elections quickly.
Yeah.
Very good day. Very good for the Republicans. If you get rid of Paul Ryan, it turns out anything is possible. You really don't have to campaign on cutting Social Security, cutting taxes, foreign wars, and this very strict sort of libertarian budget mentality that voters hate. And we've gotten rid of Paul Ryan, or the Republicans have gotten rid of Paul Ryan, and they're free to roam the country at will, actually talking about issues that voters care about. They're free to move to the left. They're free to endorse Social Security. They're free to, they're free to do a lot of things. They're free to be the Democratic Party without the woke bullshit that seems to be driving voters crazy, rightly so. So they're liberated. That's my lesson.
I wouldn't quite say they're the Democratic Party without the wokeness. There's some other things that we classically associate with the Democratic Party that they're not doing. But then again, neither are the Democrats. So,
well, like what?
Well, I mean, like soft infrastructure bill. I mean, they oppose that. That's pretty much standard issue.
They just oppose that out of Darwinian jealousy and lust, Bob.
Well, that's kind
not
of
necessarily.
True. I mean,
and certainly the local candidates that did well this year wouldn't oppose infrastructure.
So does that mean? Wait, does that mean right after the Virginia election, I was briefly living in fear that you were going to open this conversation with a big "I told you so," but then as things played out,
that hasn't happened yet.
Hasn't happened. I mean,
it's happening even as we tape this. They are voting. They are gearing up to vote on the soft infrastructure bill in Congress.
Yeah, we should remind people what triggered me last week was, well, there were a few dimensions to your argument. I mean, the one that I think drove me crazy was you're saying that it was logical to view the Virginia election as, among other things, a referendum on soft infrastructure, which I did. And I haven't heard many people interpreting, in other words, assuming that the Republican won as he did.
That's not my argument at all.
That was your argument last week, wasn't it?
I don't think so.
Well, you were saying it's
a part of referendum on the Biden administration, and that they're doing things that we don't care about. But my argument is that the Virginia election would terrify Democratic moderates who think that there might be a similar reaction of voters to the big soft infrastructure bill. Not that voters in Virginia said we don't want this soft infrastructure, so we're not going to vote for Terry McAuliffe. That's a bit of a stretch,
right?
But
you said it would be read that way to some extent.
Well, it will be read not as it can have the effect of terrifying the moderates, even if the Virginia election wasn't about soft infrastructure. In other words, the same sort of pissed offness that led people to vote Republican in Virginia might nationally, they might be pissed off enough about soft infrastructure and critical race theory and wokeness and various things that are national issues were in Virginia.
Well, see, that's why. I mean, I think that's the critical distinction. Is it taken as a referendum on wokeness, or is it taken, as I took you to be saying, to some extent, as a referendum on the kinds of democratic policy initiatives represented in soft infrastructure? Because I want to see it to some extent taken as a referendum on wokeness, because I think it would be good for the Democrats to pull back on that front. I don't think it would be good for the Democrats to pull back on the basic idea of delivering material benefits to lower and middle income people. I think that's how you beat Trump. Stick with that and drop a lot of the wokeness.
Well, I agree on delivering the benefits. All I'm saying is that congressmen are paranoid. They're always worried about how am I going to get defeated? I'm going to lose by one vote if I don't make this phone call. Oh my God, this is going to kill me. And so they look at Virginia, and the Democrats see that voters were pretty pissed off about some Democratic shibboleths. And hey, there's a whole bunch of stuff in this bill that we don't want, and it seems a little crazy to voters, and they might get mad about that too. And that Pelosi can only lose 3 votes. If 4 of them get skittish, the bill is dead. Yeah. So that was my thinking, was that it would be it sort of indirect wake-up call. And there is a theme, I think, that encompasses all of them. It is unfortunately a theme that Barry Weiss got to first, which is stop the madness. So the Democrats are just gone a little crazy.
Wait, that was her. That was her phrase. You used that last week, and
her phrase is a world gone mad. Apparently,
a world gone mad. Well, she's talking mainly about the wokeness, probably, isn't she?
Yeah, but
I mean, let me help you out if you want to claim vindication. I mean, a kind of vindication. Obviously, after an election like this, kind of everybody claims it as a vindication of their worldview. You're going to have somebody claiming that it's to some extent a referendum on soft infrastructure. The question is who's saying it. And consequentially, I heard Joe Manchin say a version of it on Fox News. Did you, he's saying, well, and I think this is a kind of a crazy argument, but he's saying, well, people are worried about inflation and, this bill could be inflationary. Well, first of all, as long as you raise taxes to pay for it, which Joe Manchin may get in the way of, I don't know, but then it won't be, notably inflationary. But the other thing is, I think, people are worried about inflation. And I know the feeling, as you know, I need to buy a car. My car's on its last legs. And it's a horrible feeling to see, you got to pay a couple of $1,000s above manufacturer suggested retail price. And you're hearing that, well, unless you want to wait a year, you better buy now. And that's like the worst feeling in the world. And I'm sure Americans all have their own versions of not liking incipient inflation. But it seems to me that the average American isn't sitting there asking themselves which legislation is inflationary. They're sitting there saying, well, as long as there's going to be inflation, yeah, I could use a little government help on my child care.
They don't seem to be saying that. Payments. Poll came out today, said more people think this bill is going to hurt them than help them. It was like 39 to 32. That's better than before when it was like 33 to 25 against the bill. They don't think the bill is going to help them. I'm
not sure people have a very clear idea what's in the bill. But once it's passed, Democrats have something to talk about. They can tell people what's in it. And if it's paired with hard infrastructure, that's all the more stuff they can talk about. I mean, there's also the argument. Go ahead.
There are a lot of parts of the bill that are not going to roll out for a while. Most people think the parental leave thing is a disaster on the left. They think the child care thing is going to dramatically raise costs by $13,000 or so, and the subsidies are not going to keep up. So it's not clear that a couple of provisions, those are 2 big ones, they're really going to say, "Oh, great, gee, I'm so happy you passed this bill," within the next year.
You know who disagrees with you on parental leave? John Alter, I think. I heard him.
A lot of people.
I heard him on a podcast, and I think he should be put in charge of Democratic strategy. I mean, he's got a plan. He says
he's a smart guy.
Yeah, and we both know him.
But does he know how the parental leave bill is structured? It's structured in this completely crazy way. I mean, David Dayen, who's a man of the left, edits the American Prospect. Described all the paperwork you have to go through. First, you have to find out if your employer covers it. Then you have to file some paperwork with the state. If the state doesn't cover it, then you go to the feds. I mean, if you can do that, they should give you money just to do that. You're obviously super competent if you can negotiate this bureaucratic maze. It's insane.
Well, I don't know the nuts and bolts, but John's idea, and I
don't think John does either.
Well, he may not, but he seems to think it polls well enough that he thinks what the Democrats should do. He was on some podcast where they were talking about how Democrats can recover from this setback, which of course was much broader than anything we anticipated. You and I had been talking about a Virginia a Virginia setback.
Right. They swept offices, all the offices in Virginia. They regained the House. They came very close to New Jersey. Many analysts claim the New Jersey thing is more troubling because they lost a bigger percentage of the vote and they lost ground among Hispanics and white blue collar workers. And they lost all the prosecutors' offices on Long Island. It was a really grim night, not just Virginia. Yes.
So John says they should go back next year, assuming that parental or whatever parental leave drops out of the bill, and assuming it passes, I guess, go back next year and force Republicans to vote on just this parental leave. He thinks it's that powerful an issue. Get them on the record voting against it.
It doesn't resonate with me. I mean, my ally in the child tax credit fight, Scott Winship of AEI, thinks it's very important. So there are people I respect, and Hagel think parental leave is very important. So I just don't see it as a issue that's going to sweep the nation the way Social Security or Medicare or providing maybe Bernie's right, providing additional benefits for Medicare would be more popular. It's just it's more universal. Not that many people face this parental leave dilemma. Yeah. If they did, I think it would be more powerful. But it would be better if the Democrats all along had picked 2 or 3 things and said, we only have a small majority, but these are really important things, and here's why. And now we're going to pass them. Instead, they said, oh my God, we're going to lose Congress. We better pass everything we ever wanted in this one big bill right now.
No, I would have liked to see more focus. I mean, if they just something as consequential as lowering the age for Medicare, by 5 or 10 years,
that'd be great.
And that would be enduring. But anyway, they are where they are. I mean, there is the argument that, a question is, do you think at this point it is tactically smart for the Democrats, if they can, to get the bill passed? I think it is. If they can get both bills passed, that's...
Well, I think they have to pass. Well, they have to pass the hard infrastructure, and that vote is coming up this afternoon or this
supposedly
evening.
I don't know. And you really think so?
There's in theory, no. I think it might be a disaster. I mean, they were supposed to vote. Can I give you the state of play on infrastructure quickly?
Okay, you have infrastructure permission for 2 minutes.
Okay. Basically, the left, the progressives, had liked the soft bill and wanted to hold the hard bill hostage and refused to pass the hard bill until they got...
Right.
They originally wanted the Senate to vote on the hard bill, but this is in the House. But they were going to settle for assurances. They didn't get those assurances. So they basically stopped them from voting on it before the election. After the election, they got a whole bunch of grief saying, probably wrongly, that you had caused this election loss, but also rightly that what are you doing holding up this bill that Biden wants and everybody wants, and it's a popular bill, and you're making us look like idiots. And they caved. They flipped. And now they will vote. They say they will vote for the bill, the hard bill, the popular hard bill that everybody loves, even though they have no assurances the Senate is going to do anything with their big soft bill if they pass it. Okay. Today, this very day, it came up. They were going to vote on the soft bill first to give the progressives a sort of fig leaf before they voted on the hard bill. The soft bill is now no longer a bill that's going to pass the Senate. It's just a bill of the House people saying what they want to happen. It has parental leave. It has it doesn't have immigration.
And then the Senate
parental leave.
And then the Senate would change it if they...
The Senate will change it, which means it has to repass the House.
Which means it's meaningless, right?
Which means it's relatively meaningless, yes. So they're going to pass this meaningless bill as a stop to the progressives. And then the idea was the progressives were they're going to march in lockstep and swallow their pride and vote for the hard bill, which does decrease their leverage because, everybody can say, hey, we got the one bill. What do we need the second one for? So that failed. They did not pass. They were going to pass this meaningless soft bill, and they didn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have the votes. The moderates rebelled. And all they're going to do is pass the rule to set up the vote for the soft bill. Then they intend to go later and pass the hard bill anyway. And it remains to be seen if enough if all it takes is 4 progressives to defect and say, fuck you, we're not giving up our leverage for the bill to go down. So, no, sorry, it takes more than that because some Republicans are going to vote for it. It takes like 20. But
I thought
there are 96 people in the Progressive Caucus, so it's possible.
I thought I saw, the Democrat whose name I don't remember, who was head of the Progressive Caucus or something. Her name it's kind of not classically American. You would know it.
Oh, Jayapal?
Precisely. I saw on Twitter shortly before we taped, I thought, her saying, look, we'll just wait.
Really?
Yeah, maybe I misunderstood it. I would just be shocked if a vote...
We'll wait for the hard bill? That would be...
I thought she said she wanted to wait and vote for both of them together. That's what I thought.
Really? That would be... That indicates a real weakness in her position because she'd been very contrite. She led her caucus into the doghouse. Everybody was pissed off at them, and she was very contrite and saying, "Oh yes, we're going to vote for the hard bill." And I guess she feels she couldn't muster
the progressive
within her own caucus support for doing it without.
Assuming I read this tweet right.
So it's all a train wreck. So it's a huge train wreck.
I may have read the tweet wrong, but I got that train wreck vibe.
Our viewers and listeners will know the truth.
Right.
It's weird how the way to find out the news now is to completely ignore the mainstream media and go directly to Twitter. It's like so much faster.
Well, for breaking stuff, that's not even true for a while.
Yeah. But there was a point to go to the New York Times. I mean, they had a crew on that would follow the breaking stuff. They had blogs. Real Clear Politics was pretty fast. No, all of that stuff for a vote like this that changes minute by minute. Ignore all those people and go directly to Jake Sherman and Heather Hagel's Twitter feed, the correspondents who are on the scene, and you'll find out what's happening. Yeah, there's one point about Trump. Yeah. There are all these. A lot of commentary about how this Virginia hurt Trump because it showed you could win without Trump, and it does show you could win without Trump. Sort of with Trumpist issues, but you can win like political correctness and CRT. Yes, and Trump may be offended by that, but he's going to run. So it doesn't do anything to stop Trump. It actually, of course, encouraged Trump because it shows the incredible weakness of the Democrats, and the weakness of Biden is becoming, very clear. I mean, my friend John Ellis thought that Monday was worse than Tuesday for Biden because on Monday a poll came out saying 44% of his party didn't want him to run for re-election.
Count me in that category.
And there was another intermediate category. Only a third wanted him to run for re-election. And apparently those are Jimmy Carter-like numbers. Those are astoundingly bad numbers. And if they persist, somebody on the left is going to challenge him.
I'm for that.
But Trump is going to look at that and say, the challenge from the left is going to weaken Biden. It's mine for the taking. And why shouldn't he take it? Even if he's not necessary to win. He wants to have it, so he's going to do it unless somebody stops him.
Don't you think the results of this election have, especially in Virginia, have emboldened people who might want to challenge him? I mean, Ross Douthat says that Youngkin himself should.
Oh, yeah, he wants Youngkin. Well, there's another Youngkin showed that you can sort of keep the Trump voters, especially in the primary, and then switch to win the swing voters in the general. Mm-hmm. And you know who else is following that strategy, Bob? Young man named J.D. Vance in Ohio.
Oh, who this week said, quote, "The professors are the enemies." It's funny. People like him talk about wokeism as being the Cultural Revolution. What he said is right out of the Cultural Revolution. It's like, let's go round up the professors, put them in public squares, shame them, and if they don't recant, kill them.
He didn't say that. He just said they're the enemy. He wants to cut off their funds.
But that kind of language, don't get me started on that guy. He will say anything. Oh,
you can't say enemy. I sort of
enemy. You just have to say
when I see a professor.
That's okay.
Just don't say what.
Just say it alone in isolation, like you said it. That's fine. You can say enemy. Watch enemy, enemy, enemy. But If you start talking about groups of people as the enemy, I would say in the current
I can't say academia is the enemy. I mean, academia is overwhelmingly liberal at this point.
He didn't say academia.
So if you're conservative, they are the enemy.
He said the professors are the enemy. I just hate that kind of shit.
What the professors is a shorthand for academia.
In this kind of political environment, when you've got more than the usual number of crazy people, for one thing, running around doing crazy shit, I think you should be careful with language like that. But I am so old-fashioned. By the way, we should say, you know who?
Well, you're very old.
I am old, and look at the fashion. I am fashioned. So you know who kind of laughed at your support? He was too polite to really drive the point home. But your support of J.D. Vance was no less than and no other than Walter Kirn, whom we had in the Parrot Room last week. And when I brought up J.D. Vance, his first reaction was to laugh, Mickey. And then when he learned that you're a big Vance supporter, the common human decency in him prevailed, and he acted like Vance isn't a total clown, which was nice of him.
You're very old-fashioned, Bob.
Let me see that guy again. What is it? Wilhelm Frederick? What are his first names?
I think GWF.
George Wilhelm Frederick.
I think so. It looks like he could have some subliminal Darwinian motives himself. Look at that.
Yeah, I wouldn't mess with that guy. He looks a little like me. Looks a lot like me.
And this is the flattering portrait.
This is the flattering version of me. You should see how bad I look on my last podcast.
Well, I just don't think Walter knows that much about J.D. Vance. I mean, maybe he does. He spends all his life driving around the country, so maybe he's, But I mean, everybody agrees when J.D. Vance talks to a respectable crowd wearing his sports coat, he's great. Okay, the only question is, are his tweets too Trumpy? And
they are.
Hard to believe they're too Trumpy for Walter.
Well, you were there. And
I've repressed this memory.
And of course you did.
I take your word for it.
Trust me, if you look closely at his reaction, it's not something you'd like to see.
No wonder you liked him so much.
By the way, special treat at the end of this podcast, if you stay tuned after Mickey and I sign off, there is a short highlight reel of Walter talking in the Parrot Room last week. Which I got to admit is, among other things, a way of encouraging people to go to Patreon and sign on, because then they can watch that and everything else in the archives. But also, it's just worth watching him. He's a good orator and a fascinating character. And I got a little heat. I think there were some commenters who clearly wish I'd given him more pushback.
Walter's a very eloquent guy, and the point is to tease out his eloquence, before you start chipping away at him. I mean, he can handle a debate.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, if we had another hour, we could attack him. I sort of agree with him. I would probably.
Oh yeah. Well, we keep having these guests in the Parrot Room who are more on your wavelength than mine. I don't know. I seem to have lost control of the process.
We've had two, and they've both been great. So what's the problem?
They are great, but I worry that if they are the reason people, sign on at Patreon, pretty soon we'll have a whole Parrot Room full of people who like you more than me. That's my concern.
Ah, okay.
I think we need more balance in among interviewees. Now,
so
Mickey,
this is like a replacement theory for the Parrot Room. You want to replace my viewers with your viewers.
Those are your words. That's your dog whistle, not mine.
Who am I whistling to?
Well, replacement is a word we've discussed before.
Yes, but who's the electorate of the Parrot Room? I'm whistling to the.
Well, you're trying to, I guess, radicalize my fellow progressives or something. My fellow anti-Trumpers, trying to bring out their most reptilian impulses, because that'll backfire on them. How's that? Trying to make them feel threatened.
I'm trolling them. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Let's see what has happened in the world. So there's this Durham investigation that's starting to get a little more interesting.
Yeah, I guess it's more interesting. I mean,
I think it is.
you want to say what's happened this past week?
Well, we should say Durham is this guy that William Barr appointed to do the kind of in the Justice Department in the waning days of the Trump administration, I guess, to do the kind of investigation Trump would like, which is to kind of, I guess his mandate was to look into the origins of Russiagate,
right,
and see if Democrats, it had been like a Democrat constructed hoax.
Right. He's already convicted one FBI lawyer for lying to the Pfizer court. So,
wait, he convicted somebody?
He
I didn't
pled
know that.
guilty. Pled guilty.
Oh, okay, yeah. And then there's this second guy, the Sussman guy, who he says kind of misled FBI people, and he's a Hillary guy, right? The Sussman.
He's in the old Hillary, big Democratic law firm, I think headed by Mark Elias. He's since quit, and Elias has defended him very forcefully. So let's give the guy the presumption of innocence. But
yeah, and also it turns out that the claim that it is a pretty remote allegation the FBI is that is being made about.
And the allegation against this Russian guy, is
more interesting.
Is it? Okay, why is it more interesting?
Well, because he was a primary source for the Steele dossier.
Right.
Okay. He's the Russian guy. And it's looking like he was in repeated contact with people in the Hillary campaign. And he has lied, I think, repeatedly to the FBI about that. So now you're seeing, a scenario whereby potentially Hillary people could have been involved in constructing the Steele dossier, right? Like they're talking to the Russian guy that Steele is saying is one of his big sources and encouraging him to say things, right? That's interesting.
That is interesting. There was one troubling thing. Part of the indictment was, and this Hillary guy he talked to has a lot of connections with Russia, and one of the parts of the indictment is the dossier was the source for the P tape, the idea that Trump had prostitutes urinate on the bed where Obama slept.
I can proudly say I was skeptical from the beginning. Trump is just not a golden shower kind of guy.
Well, they weren't showering him; they were showering the bed. So. Seems like a key difference.
I'm a believer.
But anyway,
I was.
But anyway, they visited the hotel and they talked to the guy who runs the hotel, and this is supposed to be an indictment of them. This is part of the indictment, but it's also exactly what a journalist would do. You want to find you'd go to the hotel and check it out, and check out the layout and talk to the guy who runs it. So I don't see why it's incriminating that this Russian guy who fed stuff to the dossier actually seems to have gone and checked it out. It makes no sense at all. So
is that one of the allegations?
It's part of the factual chronicle. It's not a crime, but it's the factual predicate for. And then they lay out a whole fact. They don't just. It's not one of the charges against it, but it's being held as this ominous thing, and it could be really ominous. But if you're making shit up, you don't have to visit the hotel. You can just make it up, right?
Yeah. But I do think, this may not, I guess it may not pan out, but it sounds like a clear step beyond what they had before. Before they had kind of like a Hillary guy, I think was he flacking the dossier to the FBI without saying he was a Hillary guy or what?
Basically.
So that's nothing, especially since he has no obligation to say that he is a Hillary guy. It's just that if he does say anything about it, it has to be true.
I assume they asked him, but I'm not sure. But I assume they.
The other thing is, it turns out the FBI agent he was talking to did not himself make contemporaneous notes. He talked to another agent and reported it to him, and that guy took contemporaneous notes. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway,
the case seemed vulnerable.
This thing is more interesting.
Not as anyway. So you wonder what Durham's plan is. I guess his plan is to flip this guy and have him tell on the dossier people and the higher ups, but presumably they've asked him all those questions. Is he going to now change his answers? I mean,
because now he may go to jail if he doesn't give them what they want. Yeah. He wasn't in that frame of mind before.
It's very weird that he's associated with the Brookings Institution, which is about as respectable a place, which perhaps only semi-deservedly so. But
interesting, you should mention that because I just had a conversation with Eli Clifton of Quincy, who does works on where the money comes from that goes to the think tanks, and we talked about that on the podcast. It'll be out Tuesday.
There's sort of old Brookings and new Brookings. The old Brookings scholars are great, like they're labor economists and the Henry Aaron types. I hope Henry Aaron's still there. And then there's the sort of, like all think tanks, it's had the horror for funding. And Jim Johnson, the man who destroyed the world, ran it for a while, and he started a bunch of what seems to me bogus sections. So it's not as great an institution as it used to be.
Well, all the think tanks are in that game, and it's often corrupting.
One day, maybe we should join that game. We could pause right now and have an advertisement for Meta.
I'm game.
Okay.
I'm game. If I'll get a free Oculus Quest or whatever it's called, I'm game.
Hegel didn't have to do that.
Those were the days, man.
But so there was this horrible story. Speaking of people with strong defenses, there's this terrible story on NPR. I mean, I had to go somewhere in my car, so I heard a lot of NPR stories, and it was basically, a total propaganda story of like 3 cases of white supremacy. There's the Arbery shooting. There was I forget what the second one was. Oh, the Charlottesville civil trial, and then there was the Rittenhouse. Is that the guy's name in Wisconsin?
The teenager
and they
shot a guy.
He killed people, and they crowdfunded his defense. Well, but it turns out he has a pretty damn strong defense because the people he killed were trying to kill him. He shouldn't have been there with a gun, but as soon as he showed up with a gun, people tried to attack him, and when they came after him, he shot him and killed them. He was a very good shot. So
he was the guy.
Go ahead.
There were 2 guys who killed people, right? Was he the guy that one guy was chasing? I mean, the guy wasn't armed, right? He didn't shoot an armed guy.
There was a shot that went off. One guy lunged for his gun. These are like all amid cries of, get him. So he lunged for his gun, and another guy came at him swinging his skateboard, I believe, for his head.
Oh, so it's that one. Okay. Yeah.
And so there was one guy, I believe, that was more questionable than the others, but 2 of them seemed pretty clear self-defense. And the prosecution's witnesses have all testified to this now, apparently. So the prosecution's witnesses.
The prosecution's witnesses are
they're talking about all the threats against Rittenhouse. Yes.
Well, it's on video. I mean, you can pretty much see what happened.
Right, and the prosecution's witnesses, of course, work for the Daily Caller, and they're not left-wing people. But if those are the prosecution's witnesses, what about the defense's witnesses? So it's. I mean, what's the reaction going to be if this guy is acquitted? Maybe he won't be acquitted anyway. But I mean, I thought the Floyd guy might be acquitted. Of course, there's no chance of that. So I live in a cocoon when it comes to these trials.
That was slimmer. This is more likely. I think an acquittal is more likely. I don't know what the law is in that state on stuff like this and standing your ground, but. So here's a question.
If the guy's about to hit you in the head with his skateboard, I think you're allowed to defend yourself. But
I guess I don't know. I mean, yeah, but there will be the whole question of like, was that a lethal? I don't remember the guy swinging the skateboard at him. Maybe you're right. If I saw the video, if the guy's clearly trying to hit him in the head with a skateboard, that seems like a genuine threat. And look, I mean, I would have felt threatened. Of course, the guy shouldn't have been. You shouldn't be like a teenager running around with an assault rifle.
Right. But they don't charge him with that. The criminal law doesn't get
that's
it.
The problem
doesn't get at the thing that he did wrong, which is show up in the first place. Right.
Right. Well, that's the problem. Or laws that let people roam the streets with assault rifles. So on this this Pfizer pill.
Right.
Here's a question. Like, I mean, it seems to me in principle. So the result is this Pfizer COVID therapy. They are saying cuts. I'm reading from the piece. The company's drug cut the risk of hospitalization or death in study subjects with mild to moderate COVID-19 by about 89% if they took the pill within 3 days of diagnosis. Now, that's basically saying, like, if you imagine a world in which everyone who gets COVID and gets a reasonably prompt diagnosis takes this pill, that moves the death rate by a decimal point, okay? And that would, to me, this disease has always been kind of in the twilight zone. Yeah, it's scary. It is bad. It's scary. It's horrifying. It's a terrible death, but it doesn't kill a very high percentage of people. I personally think it's high enough for us to take it, pretty damn seriously. But if you move the death rate a whole decimal point, suddenly I say have I don't know what my chances now would be. I mean, of course, I'm vaxxed, but leave that aside. It just seems to me that you're a lot closer to the flu, right, in terms of death rate?
I would think, though, Scott Gottlieb has proclaimed that this will end the pandemic as far as, a public health emergency. Exactly what you say. But he's on the board of Pfizer, which has the cure. So
he's also, was he a Trump appointee or was he already there when Trump?
I think he was already there.
Okay.
He doesn't have a terrible reputation. I think he has a pretty good reputation.
But I mean, the question I'm asking, you would think that the availability of this moves some of these debates in the direction of anti-maskers, maybe even anti-vaxxers. I mean, they will certainly invoke this unless they're so skeptical of Big Pharma that they will deny this.
They'll seize on it. And there's also a Merck, some sort of Merck drug. 89%.
Now, that is the one from weeks ago, right?
That's Lovox? No, it's something else.
I forget.
Anyway, the 89% is not enough for paranoids like me. I want 99%.
Yeah, but if you look at what the numbers were to begin with, like if you get COVID, our demographic is not all that favorable. But if we got COVID, I mean, even if I hadn't been vaxxed, and even at my age, I think my chances of dying if I get COVID were never even as high as 1 in 100. I don't think. Well, if you move into 1 in 1,000, I think I'd be back at the nightclubs being my ordinary self.
I think the death rate in some areas has been 1 in 1,000. Just pretty high
for different demographics.
Pretty high.
So look at people who are in that, and that's if you get there's a lot of people who are in that category if they get the illness. You move that to 1 in 10,000. I don't know.
And of course, they're now discovering genetic differences that predispose some people to have more severe consequences. They discovered a gene that is prevalent in only 15% of Europeans, but a lot of South Asians.
Not East Asians.
Or not really?
It's a very low frequency in East Asians, kind of medium in Europeans, and high in South Asians, I think.
But they're going to discover other ones. And it makes me wonder, given the awful death rate in the Latino community, whether there's some Latino high prevalence gene that makes it worse for them. In general, Latinos have a health advantage. The Latinos live longer. Nobody could quite figure out why, but they do. So this would be a major disadvantage. But they're going to discover more. I mean, this isn't the first. This is just the first one they've discovered, I think.
By the way, I have an update on lab leak hypothesis. Somebody corrected something I said last week. This comes from username KCZ. I think that's her name on Twitter too. And I didn't even know if it's a her. The picture is of some actress from days gone by, I think. Anyway, I had said, she left this comment on the Blogging Heads TV website. I had said that, the lab leak, just quickly, famous scientist David Baltimore had said, for him, the smoking gun in favor of lab leak hypothesis was that some weird sequence had been inserted in COVID, or there was a weird sequence in the COVID DNA sequence that you would think would have been inserted and wouldn't have happened naturally. Everybody said, but why would anybody insert that? What could the logic possibly be? I had said last week, they've now found that there actually was an application, even though it was denied, to insert that very thing in some kind of bat virus. I don't know. That wouldn't have turned it into COVID, but I think it was a bat virus. Anyway, it was some kind of virus. I had suggested that the application was made to National Institutes of Health, but the grant application that was turned down, I did say it was turned down, but it was actually made to DARPA, the Pentagon Research Agency, and they turned it down. But what I want to know is why is DARPA, the Pentagon, entertaining? I mean, I'm sure what they would say is it's for defensive bioweapons.
Right.
Okay. But at the same time, if this fact emerged about Chinese research, same grant proposal that was being submitted to a military agency, we'd kind of freak out.
There was some pro-lab leak story this week, which I haven't read, but I will have read it by the Parrot Room.
Okay, I'm writing it down.
Speaking of China, there was a very good eye-opening article for me in the American Prospect, which we'll post on the Blogging Heads website, the link.
They're very anti-China. Bob Kuttner's got a bee in his bonnet.
This is not an anti-China article.
Oh, then
this is an article about how Xi's big initiatives I think it's called Common Prosperity, is actually addressing many of the same problems with like rampant capitalism that we worry about here. Inequality, and there is this lay down movement, which I got shit for bringing up, which is Chinese workers who decide, fuck, I'm through with this rat race, it's ridiculous, and they just sort of take a job and take it easy. It's called laying down. They're not so ambitious, not so money conscious, and that's very similar to people not coming back after COVID and saying, fuck it, I don't want this job. I want to, read novels about lesbian nuns or go to grad school or get some more skills. They're just not happy with the way their lives are going.
Which of these three items doesn't belong in this sequence? But go ahead.
NPR did a story on these people, and one of the women said, I'm having such a great time. There's this great novel about lesbian nuns. It's so much more fun than my job.
That was helpful. Thank you. I think I did you a service by asking.
Anyway, so I think it was a real example. But it's very similar phenomenon, and Z is sort of trying to address them, and he has more power because he's a dictator. So the argument piece is that in Z's eyes, he has the power to address these things, and then it's not irrational and completely power hungry that he's addressing them. These are actually problems that, according to this piece, the Chinese people have that the party has recognized and said, oh shit, we have to deal with them. He has the power to address them, and our sclerotic Congress can't even pass a Build Back Better bill. So fuck it.
Right. No, I mean, look,
that is his view. And it was actually not completely sympathetic. It recognizes how corrupt, for example, the system is, especially in real estate. But it was a very good piece. It was not.
No, I mean, people don't appreciate how good the Chinese. I mean, it's obviously not a democracy, but people don't appreciate how much effort it spends on sensing what the grievances are of the people and actually addressing them. It's a very centralized, ultimately, I guess, approach to it. And I think China has kind of a long history of doing this, but that's true. And people are, as I've said, they can do their little local protests, and authorities will pay attention and often do something about it.
And you could still hate C after reading this article, but it will give your views more depth.
The other another place
she.
where we say they now, Mickey. Just kidding. The other place where his godlike power matters, climate change. Do you
But
realize
I thought he didn't show up at the Glasgow summit, and
he didn't, and I think that's his way of of saying just shut up about our domestic, about all the things I don't want you to talk about, ranging from Taiwan to the Uyghurs. But and I don't know if it's a bluff or not, but it is the case. We did a little item about this in today's non-zero newsletter. Do you know how many nuclear reactors they plan to build within the next 15 years by way of addressing climate
120.
change? 150. You were close. 150 nuclear reactors. That's more than the entire world has built in the last 35 years or something. And he can do it. They may well do it. And in 15 or 20 years, the story may be they're on top of the climate change game. I don't know.
It's also the real estate crisis is sort of interesting because somehow the prices of houses are appreciating, yet they're completely overbuilt, and they're actually they've built so many extra houses in a nation of 1 billion people that they're actually tearing some of them down.
You mean in China?
In China, which I don't. That sort of suggests
big crisis.
Sorry,
there's a big crisis. There's a big crisis.
But I don't think prices have gone down. I don't think prices have gone down. I think the regulators have cracked down and forced Evergrande and these people to basically sell some of their assets. But it's not that the assets would be worth less, except that everybody knows Evergrande's selling them in a distress sale. Right. The other interesting point that John Ellis's newsletter clued me into is their mortgage system works differently from ours, and that basically the buyer is on the hook. In other words, if Evergrande somehow, if I don't know enough about, you don't get funding from a third party. You the buyer, if Evergrande defaults on its payments, the actual consumer takes the hit, not the mortgage company.
Well, I mean, if you were, first of all, I heard that 1.5 million people in China have paid Evergrande a lot of money for apartments that don't even exist. Right. Okay, they were buying them, making a big down payment and then payments for apartments that hadn't even been built, and it looks like they'll never be built. So they're screwed. But I didn't understand why they would be less screwed in America. I mean, if I've paid my down payment and a bunch of payments to the mortgage company, I don't think the mortgage company is going to refund my money if the house turns out not to get built or something, right?
I'll try to figure that out for the Parrot Room, but it does work differently, and it has a direct effect on consumer spending in a way that, like the S&L crisis, did not have an effect in the United States.
Evergrande also sold they're selling their company jets to scrape up money to make their debt payments, or at least not default.
I do like the idea of the way every initiative in China has a number to it. So it's the 3 red lines. That's what he imposed. That was what she imposed on the mortgage industry, and they're the 10 grave problems, and they're the 5 this and the 4 that. It's very helpful.
Yep,
we should start numbering things.
We need bullet points. You and I should start doing it.
I'm ready.
The two guys you should listen to every Friday, like that, something like that.
There's a whole the newsletter craze reached new heights this week.
Why? Who signed on?
Well, Atlantic announced 9 new newsletters, and they're weird newsletters that they're not Substack newsletters. They're associated with the Atlantic and paid by the Atlantic, and I don't think they're if they meet certain subscriber goals, but you don't pay to hear them. It's just to encourage you to subscribe to the Atlantic.
But you have to be by the way, our alarm, this is our 5-minute warning. We've been on 55 minutes. My alarm just went on. Well, wait. So first of all, not on the Substack platform, but you don't get these for free, right? I mean, you have to be at least
you have to subscribe to the Atlantic, but but it's like, why would you writing a newsletter is hard work, and why would you do that every day? I mean, I can't do it. I've tried.
Well, if the Atlantic paid you a lot of money, would you do it?
Yeah, if they paid me $300,000, if they paid me Matt Iglesias money, I would do it. But the whole allure of writing a newsletter
that would be
now,
a lot of money per word in your case. But go ahead.
It's the one word I write is a good word, Bob. Worth $400,000.
It's enemy.
The idea is you get rich. That's what motivates people. Doing all that work just to get fucking $50,000 from the Atlantic. I mean,
you don't know what they're paying them, right?
No, I don't know. It could be more than that. It's probably more than that. It's Mrs. Jobs.
God, I looked at them and I just thought Blob Central.
Molly Jong Fast is a very good writer.
So they may be good writers, but I mean, everyone whose foreign policy view I'm aware of, whoever gets into that space, it's like, oh God, please.
I doubt she is
totally predictable.
I doubt she is blobby. She's sort of progressive Democrat, mocks Republicans.
Yeah, but that's
I understand.
That's a big part of the blob problem. There are tons of blobby people.
But I doubt she was on board with, say, the war in Iraq.
I doubt she publicly opposed it. I don't even know who she. All I know is her name.
Oh, I think she probably did. I've met her.
Okay, well, let's bet. How much you want to bet?
I've met her, and she's great. She's just like us.
I'll bet she did not. She is not on record opposing the Iraq War, and I know nothing about.
Okay,
her,
I'll bet you that.
You're saying she was
a
progressive.
I'll bet you that.
Okay, now I'm not saying she is on record supporting it. I'm saying she's not on record opposing it.
Right. No, I understand.
How much is the bet?
$10. What I made in royalties on my book last year.
Okay.
$10.33.
I'm willing to add a decimal point 2345 to that, but your call. Just name your decimal point.
No, $10 is fine. I mean, how much do we think Hegel got in royalties?
I don't know. You know who was bitterly resentful of Hegel? If I've got the story right, was Schopenhauer. Do I have that right?
I don't know.
Or is that the wrong?
I was thinking about you. I would think you were Hegelian since you sort of your book Non-Zero has a sort of dialectic that ends with some sort of universal.
Yeah, but I'm a materialist.
But you're a materialist, so you've combined Marx and Hegel in a productive way.
Well, I don't know if I've combined. I mean, Fukuyama is Hegelian. He's all about the evolution of the ideas, and I think the ideas tend to flow from the material.
But I mean, ideas do evolve of themselves.
Well, that's the question. To what extent is that autonomous? And to what extent is it a reflection of technological evolution and so on?
I mean, but sometimes it's clearly autonomous. That it's logical that as rock bands get louder and louder, A, the next band will be even louder, and B, then there'll be a blowback and people want it softer. I mean, that sort of has nothing to do with materialism. But the really big, important ideas, if you have an idea and it comes into conflict with how people earn their money and make a living, the making a living is going to win out, and the ideas are going to change. That's the way so that's how I see it. It doesn't mean that there's no sort of internal non-materialist of evolution of ideas, but they also have to meet the materialist test.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough question to wrap your mind around. I'll confidently say that. I say that with complete confidence.
We want more from Hegel.
I mean, we are in the ideas game. We must think that there is some point in intervening at the level of ideas, right? We think that ideas matter. And so I definitely believe they matter in some sense, or they matter within some parameters, so I'm not. I wouldn't deny that.
I mean, it was sort of logical that if the New Deal dispenses a lot of money to workers, that somebody's going to come along and say, "Wait, we should just dispense the money to everyone and have a universal UBI," right? I mean, that's sort of going to happen. The question is, does this seed fall on fertile ground or not?
And you're determined that it not. Not if,
but not Sam Hammond, who reveres you as a god.
That was so nice of him. And nice of you to start the podcast that way, which leads me to the fact that we are now at the 1 hour mark and we're duty bound to start winding this down. But quickly, I would just say that, you know what happened without us even realizing it? You know what died? You know what institution? I mean, it's not officially dead, but it's looking pretty glassy eyed.
Well, not the Atlantic. They have a very good new publisher who's going to give them at least a few years before they fail again.
Who's the new publisher?
Nick Thompson.
I thought he was president, but yeah.
Oh, he runs the business side.
Yeah, yeah. No, he's great. I'm just waiting for.
No, I don't know what else died. The Committee for Free World, that died a long time ago.
No, it didn't die in name. It's still there, but I just hadn't realized that it was. And we will not turn this into
WeWork.
Room tease.
WeWork seems to be dying.
You're getting a little closer.
Uber.
You're in that Silicon Valley space, which is
Theranos. Yahoo.
Yeah, Theranos has definitely seen better days. Yeah.
Ozzy.
Yeah. You're getting there. You're getting there.
Salon is still there. The Salon Death Watch has been going on for like 30 years now.
And with good reason. Must I give you the answer?
Yes.
When was the last time you heard anybody rave about Clubhouse?
Oh, well, yeah, that's that's like, Soho House. It's like stop being cool.
Exactly. And
somebody
about that.
Somebody blamed Eric Weinstein, claiming he scared everybody away.
That would be a great meme to spread. Seems implausible. I think it probably had some kind of structural problem. Also, it never rolled out to Android. I mean, come on. How self-satisfied are we here?
I blame their algorithm. There was, I bought this new phone just so I could listen to Clubhouse.
Yeah.
I was happy with Android, but I bought the iPhone just so I could listen to Clubhouse.
That's pathetic.
And
that's like the way you drive across the country to go to a party. That's the exact same part of you, Mickey. Yes, it is.
My only friend in town told me that if I bought this Clubhouse, I could kick ass on Clubhouse and it would change my life. And she's given me
try, right?
No, she's given me, because I'm too timid, but she's given me good advice before, and I figured there's no harm in owning an iPhone, so why not do it? But it would never serve up conversations that I was interested in, except for one group run by my friend Richard Rushfield, which was hilariously funny and made my day for half an hour. And the phone was worth it just for that half hour every day. It showed you the possibilities that were there. And then Rushfield abandoned it, and there was Clubhouse with a vast desert for me. I think the algorithm just served up crap. It didn't. Maybe the good stuff is there, and it's just not serving it up to me.
I think Eric Weinstein killed it.
It doesn't serve me up, Eric Weinstein. It serves me up somebody named Josiah Neely, who's always talking. And every hour I get, Josiah Neely is talking about something else. I assume this person.
Have you ever gone in to see? Well, then it is a bad algorithm if it keeps serving it up and you never click. That's the very definition of a bad algorithm.
I want the algorithm that serves me up a thing where I am the hottest guy in the room, and so people will want to harvest my sperm. Supposedly that happens. If you were a hot guy on Clubhouse, people called you up from sperm banks and said, "Can we have your sperm?" I'm serious about that. It's never happened to me for unknown reasons, but it does happen to hot guys.
And then you get paid to masturbate, and can't beat that as a way to make a living.
Bob Hagel would never have said that. That's just not.
Woody Allen said it. Woody Allen said it in a movie long ago, back when we were in a more conservative America. He was, I forget which movie, but he said, you just masturbate into a little cup.
I didn't hear the sentence after you said the word masturbate. I just checked out. What can I say?
It was that jarring. Sorry.
Well, it was that jarring.
Don't worry. Okay, so what are we going to talk about in the Parrot Room? Now we've taken care of that subject. We won't be talking about that
for a couple of decades.
Glad I got it out of the way.
Yeah.
Well, it is. Look, it is part of the process, Mickey. I'm sorry. Did you think it just like magically happens? You give them permission to impregnate women with your semen, and it's like
no,
you
I
do
know how it happens, Bob. I just don't.
Online.
There's some things I don't talk about. There is some Epstein.
Look, we talked about Jeffrey Toobin weeks on end.
Okay, that's true.
We had a whole vocabulary. I
That's
should have
point.
used the euphemism, pleasuring your parrot.
Right.
Which we
did not.
With at that point.
Yes, I believe.
That was my bad. I meant pleasuring your parrot.
Okay. Well, there is some Epstein news that I don't know about, but I will know about by the Parrot Room.
Okay. Now you got to keep track of these. Okay. I don't want to take the blame.
There's the lab leak.
Yeah.
There is corruption at the Cato Institution. There's the embarrassment of the Lincoln Project. Can Joe Manchin really get away with driving a Maserati? That seems pretty amazing. There's
gas powered, yes.
Really? Okay, if it's coal powered, yes. Gas powered, I don't know.
Yeah. It's a coal powered.
There's go ahead. There's the Biden offering $450,000 to every person who was separated from their child at the border, and this being a politically toxic issue. We can talk about the SALT deduction if you want.
Oh, sounds. Actually, I live in a SALT relevant state. That is the state and local.
There's Henry Kissinger being alarmed at the competition between the U.S. and China. And if you've alarmed Henry Kissinger and Bob Wright,
it's all his fault.
Well, you can talk about that. There's the future of custom cars, which is actually very exciting.
Yeah,
you can get into that.
The frisson.
That's all I got. Not a lot.
Okay. What do I have?
I'll have an update on how fucked up the congressional vote is. But go ahead. So go ahead.
I will briefly mention this Alan Dulles book I'm reading, and maybe even give us another best and brightest update. I am slogging through that book, which is my own personal Vietnam. I will report on the unkind things Sam Harris said on me on the Decoding the Gurus podcast. Still kind of smarting about that.
I hate to tell you, Bob.
Yeah.
I think Sam Harris was on one of these lists too. Not the list of the top 10 people, but just the list of all the great minds you can see on the web that we never would have been exposed to before. And one of them was Eric Weinstein. One of them was Steve Pinker. One of them was you. But one of them was Sam Harris.
I'll take care of that.
Okay.
You already said lab leak. I still haven't watched your Velvet Underground doc. I'm getting around to it.
It's going to be been, gone, and trashed by the time you get around to it.
I did watch part 1 of the Foundation. Are you an Asimov fan? I've never read him, but I'm watching apparently the first episode of
like every other kid. I read the first Foundation, loved it, and never got around to the second Foundation, which is hard to find. It must really suck. You can find the first one, and you can find the third one, which is about how the mule has destroyed the grand plans of this genius, and the mule is a Trump-like figure. But the second one, where the mule actually wins the first battle, go ahead, try to find it. Even you.
Okay. So maybe we can talk a little about Foundation in the Parrot Room. Also, and this is a segue to a reminder of the treat that comes at the end of this podcast, the Walter Kirn mashup. I mean, if people don't know who he is, he's an accomplished novelist, wrote the novel that the George Clooney movie Up in the Air was based on, which kind of anticipated Trumpism in a sense, I think, and we talked about that. But aren't
you reading his book on Clark Rockefeller?
I listened to the whole thing. It's very good. It's called Blood Will Out, and I recommend it as a short, real life. You wouldn't call it a mystery anyway. I'll talk about that a little in the Parrot Room. It's very good.
It begins with a dog.
A dog figures centrally. A dog that even I wouldn't have probably spent the time rehabilitating. And you know how I am about my dogs. Here they are. So we should head out, let people watch their Walter Kirn clips, and if they're intrigued, go to patreon.com/Parrot Room, or they could just click, smash the like button, rate and review.
Okay, and we'll have
go read your newsletter. You've actually been prolific. You've put out a couple of newsletters lately.
I know.
Couch Files.
I've exhausted my Sudafed limit with the state of California. I'm going to have to move on to the harder stuff.
Walter tweeted about Sudafed. What is it about you Trump supporters and Sudafed?
That's our little secret. We tweak on Sudafed.
Apparently. Okay, so
all about the Sudafed.
All right. We will see you in the Parrot Room.
I spent my life in sort of middle America. First, because I was born there and grew up there, and then by choice. I have a lot of sympathy for people who feel they are being played with by the gods, the sort of Thomas Hardy characters of America, who feel, you know, there's a town in Iowa that's kind of the lodestar of my political feeling called Newton, Iowa. It used to be the Maytag city, sort of the Detroit of dishwashers and refrigerators. One day, Maytag, because of free trade and the Chicago School of Economics and everything else, disappeared from a town of about 25,000 people. They couldn't buy football equipment for the team. Houses that had been worth X were now worth 1/3. America told them to learn the code. Leave grandma in the nursing home there in Newton and go out to, I don't know, Mountain View, where supposedly you'll be able to afford a motel room, and try to get a job. When I saw the cruelty that the masters of the universe visited on the place I grew up, it was for me a defining moment. And it happened slowly, starting in the 90s, though in some ways it happened even earlier in agricultural farm country where I lived, because, you know, that place had its crash back when Jimmy Carter told them all to, you know, borrow against their land, buy tractors, and become super producers. And they all went broke when interest rates went up. So I've seen middle America fall off cliffs and down staircases my whole lifetime at the mercy of the big planners. And this is a country that's supposedly about its people. It's not a country about share prices. It's not a country about utopian socialist visions either. It's a country which is, in a sense, trying to do the best for what is essentially an island, a giant island of people who came from all over the world. And it has knocked them sideways time and time again with these sort of huge, airy, lofty decisions. And so I don't know that I'd even call myself a conservative. You know, when I was a kid and younger, I probably identified with the Hubert Humphrey style Democrats, the so-called Democratic Farmer Labor Party of Minnesota. But the notion that the progressive mainstream Democratic Party somehow had these people's interests in mind was impossible to maintain. And when I moved out east and I saw that the makers and engineers of American opinion and American institutional power were all people who partied together on Martha's Vineyard, basically. I mean, I used to work at Spy Magazine, and one time we decided we wanted to do a map of the establishment, and every editor was given the assignment, who sits at the very center of the American establishment. And I really studied it. I used my own social experience at Princeton and New York, and I decided it's Carly Simon. It's Carly Simon and James Taylor on Martha's Vineyard, or wherever. I've never known the difference between that and Nantucket, but wherever they are,
they're very different.
And when Clinton used to go on vacation in the summer, they always go to Martha's Vineyard. Right. Carly Simon would always be at the bottom of the staircase greeting him from the plane, and so I felt vindicated in my guess. And Carly Simon doesn't give a goddamn about Newton, Iowa, or anything between the mainland of Massachusetts and Hawaii. And so how could one not want to advocate for what one feels is this great inner space in America?
Walter, have you ever thought about running for president?
Oh, man, I have. And I was astonished by his speech at the 2016 convention, Mickey. To be honest, it blew me away. I felt like I was hearing more blunt, I hesitate to say truth-telling, but shoot from the hip, just, laying it down. It did not seem like a political speech. I'd seen you before at the 2012 Democratic Convention and watched Obama's second acceptance speech, which to me was as cardboard and, unrooted a speech as I'd ever seen. And I'd seen Obama on the campaign trail in 2008. Then when I saw Trump stride out and give what was described universally the next day as a dystopian, dark, disturbing vision of America, it was like this casino boss walking onto the floor in a Scorsese movie and just sending all the minions, fluttering with his, Gotterdammerung address. And so when he won, which I felt immediately he would after seeing that speech, there was the question of whether everything would just turn into a comic book and the country would fall apart. And when, despite his personality and despite, I think, the disarray in his administration, the country didn't fall apart. When in fact, for 3 years until the dawn of COVID, right up until that last State of the Union address, things seemed pretty good, effervescent, and strong in America. I thought, wow, we don't have to hire lawyers as president forever. I suggest that when you go into the forest of Substack and alternative media, you need to be vigilant and observant and selective in a way you don't have to with the mainstream media, only because in the mainstream media, everything's the same. How can I put it? Picking and choosing your sources between the Washington Post, the New York Times, CNN, and so on is pointless because they're all coming from the same fountain of establishment, propaganda, basically. So I only say be aware of your environment in the Substack universe. But to be very blunt, it's the most creative and fertile place right now in journalism, and I probably read the alternative or entrepreneurial media at a rate of 9-1 over the mainstream. I know what they're saying without reading their papers now. I can actually read a conspiracy theory or some bizarre take on the news, and I can infer what the mainstream news is saying. I can reverse engineer to see what they're against, what they're reacting against. I look at politics as a drama critic might to some extent. Or a German sociologist of around 1900. I examine the archetypes, the charisma of people, the sort of dramatic mythos of their presentation. Because I'll tell you honestly, I don't think politics is an honest game in which people, press rational programs that can be easily situated on a spectrum. I think it's showbiz to some extent, or it has been for a while, with a lot of interests and a lot of money and a lot of think tanks in the background. But when I saw Trump, what I saw was a relief from an America that was, as you say, inhibited, becoming deeply inauthentic, scripted, and somewhat alienated from the its animal spirits, and I saw its animal spirits awakening, and that was the same thing that a lot of progressives saw as dangerous about Trump, because the minute they see responsive crowds, they think Leni Riefenstahl. Despite having celebrated Obama's ability to excite that response. So I was like, American culture, politics, and so on to me are one big ball of wax. And I saw it starting to open up and change. And I saw the American people doing something which I think we have a genius for, which is trying something new. And so I wasn't going to immediately shout that down. And when I saw my colleagues in lockstep take this as some kind of, descent into, blood and soil, fascist propaganda, I thought, oh, come on. I mean, he has no brown shirts. He waited until he was 70 something to start his, to do his putsch. No, I just never bought it.
Yes, the Proud Boys, Walter.
Yeah. AstroTurf. I mean, the other thing is I lived in Montana during the 90s when the so-called militia movement was the great boogeyman of the Clinton administration, after Waco and Oklahoma City and so on. And I knew that this is 11 guys meeting at a Ramada Inn, and it never got bigger than that. And yet I had to read headlines every day about this percolating insurrection. It's just not one of my fears as a person.
Now, what about
the apocalypticism about American democracy is to me more dangerous than the brouhaha of American democracy. This country has been a flippin' gang fight for a couple of hundred years politically, and it was in Lincoln's day, and it was, half the people think Lincoln stole that election, half the people think McClellan almost stole it. But I really feel that this talk about we're on the brink of the end of democracy suggests that we're going to need to replace it with something more durable, because it's talk that's going to only lead to more of what we fear. Democracy, giving every Joe a vote and having them counted by a million different municipalities and so on, and trucked around by mailmen and stuff. You think that's going to be freaking smooth? That's an insane dream that we have. This is going to be a battle royal, and that we let it be, I think, is fine. That we act as though we may have to snatch away this system and replace it with what? Mark Zuckerberg chooses the president. I mean, when Ross Perot ran back in the 90s, and made all his, chalkboard predictions about NAFTA that were all laughed off. I laughed with him because I was an establishment journalist. But the guy seemed like the biggest kook of all time. But to see that it took only a sort of smart businessman to read the writing on the wall, it did also change me somewhat. I mean, and I speak to NAFTA in particular, but we know where we're going to some extent. We know that the little guy's getting littler, and we've squeezed about all we can out of them. You can't get more lopsided in income distribution than we are now, probably, without being, El Salvador or something. And so I don't feel that it's incumbent on me to have an ideology. It's incumbent on me to know when things have gotten way out of balance. And I just don't see this political establishment, for all its ability to settle things behind closed doors and in a genteel way, I don't see it doing anything but rushing further and further into this devastating imbalance. And populism, what's so bad? What's so funny about populism? To quote Elvis Costello or something, it's peopleism, right? And what's so bad about people? America seems to be all about everything but its people. It's got wonderful imperialist and technocratic and foreign policy ideas, but St. Louis, they could drop a bomb on it, and I don't think a lot of people would care in Washington. And sometimes I fear a bomb will be dropped on it for that reason. I'm protective of flyover country, because what is politics but being loyal to your you?
Oh, he froze up
for it. Why do I have to get up in some 19th century way and have a great theory of?
Right. I remember that I'm trying to think of why was I anti-populist in the Clinton era. And I guess Midwestern people were people who didn't have the gumption to rent the U-Haul and move in to where the jobs were, and change is what produced capitalism's success. And we were becoming sclerotic and resistant to change because they wouldn't leave grandma in the nursing home and go to where the jobs were, the way Americans always had before. I guess that was one strand of it. And the other strand was that they were fighting an income inequality that was, it was futile to fight it, and you should learn to live with it.
Yeah, Walter, when it comes to income inequality, I'm on the same page as you, and Mickey is, I'm afraid, not. But
no, I've come around a little.
You got a funny way of showing it.